Welcome to Raiders on the Record, the podcast featuring Hastings High School athletics. I'm Athletic Director Trent Hansen. My colleague Tim Hanneberg and I work together to bring you the stories of Raider sports. We are thrilled to share conversations with the athletes, coaches, and alumni that represent Raider Nation. Check back weekly and be sure to share this podcast with your friends in the Raiders Network.
Jeffe Taffe is a 1999 Raider graduate. During his time at Hastings High School, he participated in hockey and baseball. In hockey, he was a 3-year letter winner and led the team to a 5th place finish during his junior year and a 2nd place finish during his senior year. He was also named Mr. Minnesota for hockey during his senior year. In baseball, Jeff was a 3-year letter winner, leading the team to a state title during his senior year. After graduation, he attended the University of Minnesota for 3 years, where he started for the Gopher hockey team and led them to a national title during his junior year. After college, Jeff had a long professional career lasting 17 years. Throughout that time, he played in Phoenix, Pittsburgh, Chicago, and Minneapolis, and was on the practice squad when the Pittsburgh Penguins won the Stanley Cup in 2009. Jeff eventually played overseas in Sweden and Russia before retiring. All right, here we are with Jeffe Taffe. Jeff, we always start at the beginning of someone's life, so take us back to you growing up. Did you always live in Hastings? Were you always from Hastings? Were your parents from Hastings? Brothers, sisters, mom and dad growing up? What did that look like for you?
So it's just me and my sister Jamie. She's 4 years younger than me. We lived there our whole life. My dad is from Morris, Minnesota, and my mom's from just outside Alexandria, a small town called Hoffman. And they basically moved down there when they were becoming teachers. And that's, they lived there since, I'd say mid-70s, I would think, something like that. And so grew up, like I said, just her and I were going to Pinecrest Elementary to start, ended up at McCullough. Then obviously Hastings Middle School, Hastings High School, and that was it.
Nice. Talked about the schools you went to. That's usually my next question. If you could think back here, I know it might be a long time ago, but you don't have to go through every grade. Was there a certain teacher maybe here and there at each school that really had a big impact on you? They might still be teaching or they might still be around, and we could send this out to them as well.
Yeah, there was always a lot of them, I think. Like elementary schools, it's always hard to remember. I mean, I remember most of them and just being great people. Middle school just seems like a blur, I think, for every kid out there. It's one of those things where you didn't know what was going on half the time there. As far as high school, I always liked, I had old Doc Loudon as a teacher one year and got a good kick out of him. And then we had Slakowski, I think was his name. He taught AP. It was like a government class or something like that. He was into basketball and things like that. He was a good guy, just kind of really down to earth, and I really enjoyed him as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The next thing we always like hearing about is the sports you played growing up. I typically like to stop somewhere around 7th grade. I always bring it up. I feel like that's when people get a little more serious with sports. Someone like you maybe gets brought up to a JV or varsity level at a young age. So like I said, let's hear about the sports you played growing up, and then we'll stop right around 7th grade. Yeah,
I think I was a little bit different. I think, I obviously started hockey on my own. My parents, both sides of the family have never done it before. We ended up moving on Westview Drive. There was a park right behind there. That's the only reason I started skating, really. And then I was really into baseball, though. That was my other thing. So it was just kind of those two. I'd play football with the kids in the neighborhood. But other than that, I was just never really into it. Maybe I was just a little too small or a little too intimidated, and I just kind of rode that out through my high school career too. So it was just kind of baseball and hockey for me. I kind of started getting into golf when I was in like 4th or 5th grade. And that was also a thing that I still love to do today.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Yeah.
So I know it might take a while, but I typically like to start maybe in 7th grade, that fall season. And then it usually works the best if we go through each season by each sport. So we'll start 7th grade fall, 7th grade winter, 7th grade spring, and we could just work from your 7th grade year all the way to your senior year. And once again, some things we really like hearing about is the level you played at, any individual accomplishments. So all conference, all state, things of that nature, captainship as well, especially then things with your team as well. So if your team qualified for the state tournament, state place winning, if you guys made the section finals, things of that nature too. So it might take a while, like I said, with you, but let's start in 7th grade in the fall, and we can work our way through middle school and then high school.
I would have to say in the fall, I probably didn't do anything, to be honest with you. I was just kind of hockey, baseball the whole way up. And I don't know, with 7th grade. 7th grade would still be probably a peewee. So it would have been a peewee, and then obviously our baseball team. I see, this is where I need, Danny Welch on. He's got straddles off stats like crazy from
He
all
probably knows your batting average from each year and how many goals you scored and points and all this stuff, huh?
Yeah, he's on top of that stuff. So it was probably 7th, 8th grade would have been my first year Bantams playing. I don't think we were even allowed to play up at that age, and obviously I was a lot smaller back then. I didn't grow until I was later on in high school. So 8th grade would have been, I think I actually played soccer in maybe 8th or 9th grade just to kind of do something. I don't know if my parents pushed me onto that or who it was, but like I said, I was not going to play football. So I was definitely going to try to do something. Just didn't really love it that much, to be quite honest with you. Maybe because I wasn't very good, I guess. I don't know. A lot of running, pretty boring. So kind of cut that one out pretty quick. But no, we had some good for hockey. We had some really good Bantam teams. Made it pretty far every year in that sport. Baseball, we're pretty good in baseball too. So it's kind of the same group coming up all the time together, and that really paid off in the end. Then if you go towards 9th grade, obviously it's another year of Bantams, and I think we were just growing as a team. Hastings High School team was okay, had some good players on there for sure that were older than us. Baseball, that was one of those things where I think they had actually talked about bringing Danny up in 9th grade for the playoffs to maybe pinch run or something like that, or maybe even play. I do remember that. And then when we got to 10th grade, it ended up being nothing in the fall, unless I played soccer again. I don't know. I really hope I didn't, because that sounds terrible if I keep forgetting. But that would have been like a JV or something way down below that. So then it would have been hockey season, 10th grade. Pretty good year for our team. We were okay. We had some good leadership, and we had Jeff Oakman, Torkelson. We had a bunch of those guys on our team. They were really good leaders. Nobody got down on us. Say it was me or Danny or some of the younger guys that actually made it as sophomores. So that was huge for our development and just kind of seeing what it took each year. Going into the spring, it was varsity baseball. That was the same. It was what my best friend now, Corey McKenzie, was on the team. You had Oakland, you had some of these guys, and like I said, I was still undersized. Danny was probably a better player. Corey was a really good player who ended up going to St. John's playing baseball. And you could just tell that, okay, we're missing a little bit here. So then going into 11th grade, just hockey. I was probably at that time in 10th and 11th grade, I was probably starting to have to travel a little bit for the U.S. teams that I was joining on the international things like that. So that kind of threw a little crinkle in baseball once in a while in the spring, and then in the fall when I'd have to travel. But our hockey season that year was, that was kind of when, we had a year older than us. It's Corey McKenzie, Blake Bartelma, that whole group of guys they just knew the role. Greg Jacobson, they just played hard every game. And, we had Ben Utek was on our team, and, we were finally starting to come into a little bit. And we also had some help from the class below us, whether it was an Adam Gerlach or a Vanderbosch and some of these guys. So our hockey team, I think we ended up making it to we made it to the state tournament that year. And I was actually talking with Russ about this the other night, because I was up in White Bear for the hockey day in Minnesota talking to somebody, and I couldn't remember where we played. And he's like, that was the Civic Center. That was the Target Center. We ended up, I think, getting beat by Duluth East maybe that year. Pretty good. Ended up going through and winning the consolation championship that year, I believe. Kind of left a little sour taste in our mouth, but we kind of understood, all right, there was better teams than us at that time. We were good, but we weren't that good. Baseball was the same. Don't remember how far we made it. Where you can kind of tell you're just missing a little bit. And you never even really thought about the state tournament for baseball or anything like that, because you'd have to run through Cretin. And so when we matched up with them sections, it was just, they had all the guys going D1 and D2, D3, and it was just, we were just overmatched.
Mm-hmm.
So then the following season, I was gone a little bit again, overseas, playing in a couple tournaments. Hockey season rolled around. And I mean, when you have, 3 guys going to the Gophers right from high school, you're expected to win. And, we lost some games early. And I do remember Russ was kind of blowing a gasket a few times. And, he's getting honest, because it was very easy for our team just to, show up and win. And he knew it's going to be a lot harder than that in the playoffs and state tournament. Ended up getting all the way to the state championship. That was one of those things where we ended up playing Roseau. I think they only had like 3 lines, 5 or 6 D, but it was a big team. It was very an intimidating team. And, they're coming from up north. We're supposed to be this great city team that, is supposed to win. And so I think we probably had a lot more pressure than they did.
Mm-hmm.
They definitely had some great players, but as far as like the Twin Cities metro area and us going to the Gophers, I think that was probably the projection. And I remember one of the first few shifts in the game, Danny took a draw and I took a shot, and the goalie didn't even move and saved it. Like, just kind of threw it back. And I've never had that feeling before where I'm like, this is not going to go well tonight.
Yeah.
And yeah, we just got absolutely steamrolled. I had a bad attitude after the game, which I regret. It's kind of one of those things where you got to tip your cap. They were just better than us. They played better as a team, and that's what happens. It's part of the game. It's part of growing up. So then we go into the baseball season. Obviously, we're a little bit older. We got a couple of younger guys on the team. The class behind us had some really good players, and we're cruising along pretty good. Park Cottage Grove was always good. They had Luke Appert. He was going to the Gophers for baseball. So, they were always a team to contend with in our section as well. But then we had Cretin in there still. And that's when I think Joe Maurer was a 10th grade or 9th or 10th grader that year. So we definitely had our work cut out for us. I think they were on that heater of like 50 some straight wins or something like that. And I knew that was supposed to be a 2 out of 3, because I don't know how the brackets worked back then, but to get there, whatever, that's what it was. We ended up winning the first game against them, and it was a pretty good game. I think it was real tight at the end, went in our favor. I think we got beat pretty bad the second game. So we're going into this thinking, oh my gosh, how's this going to work out for us? And I think we ended up 10 running them in like 5 innings. It was just kind of unheard of. Everything played out right. Make it to the state tournament. We're losing our first game, the whole game. One of the last few innings, Matt Vanderbosch hits a home run, and it was just another one. And then we end up winning the state tournament. That was pretty crazy. That was kind of a great way to go out, especially after that big loss in hockey. And, you knew that feeling. And it's funny, we lose it in hockey, but win in baseball. It's just kind of strange how it worked.
Yeah. So thinking back, we had Adam Gerlach on here as well as along with Danny Welch. So I know a lot of the awesome stories came out, and one of the ones that Danny was bringing up was your senior year hockey tournament. And he had that kind of amazing goal with a couple seconds left. So, think about that too. What were you kind of feeling during that time too? I know you guys were down and you guys tied it late, and then it's just seconds left in the game. He got that pass and then scored. So kind of led you guys into the state final. So kind of maybe walk us through that, because that was a pretty special moment for you guys too.
Yeah, it was weird. I've seen that a bunch too. And that was one of those things where completely different than the final game where when we lost, like you had that feeling like, oh, this is over. That one, I didn't feel that way at all. It was really strange. I think, we still had plenty of time left, and I mean, it's just so weird thinking about it. There was no panic. There was really no panic, I don't think. I was more shocked when he actually scored to win it, so we didn't have to go into overtime. That was a way better surprise for me than the tying goal. That's for sure.
Yeah, I know a couple things he talked about too was that something along with the lines of the way the time frame went out. You guys had maybe that late game, and then you had a rebound early again against Roseau. And he talked about how, once again, you talked about it as well. The goalie was just a monster and just had tons of saves in that game too. So not making any excuses. He wasn't making an excuse, but just said the time frame just didn't really work out, and he felt like they needed just you guys maybe needed a little more rest, and that goalie was just on that night too. So just kind of maybe a little bit of some bad circumstances there too.
Yeah, I could see that from his standpoint. I think, you go through a couple emotional games like that and you're a high school athlete. That's a big deal, so maybe you're riding really high after those games and thinking, okay, this is going to be easy. And then when you come out a little slow, a little flat, you got nothing in the tank. And it's hard if your body's not reacting the way you want it to, but if you're not mentally into it, you got no chance. And that's kind of the way I felt with that one. Yeah.
Yeah. A couple more things too. I know Adam did talk about the 10 running Cretan, which was a pretty amazing thing. Maybe for you too, because both those guys had very similar experiences, but they also played football. So it was just kind of a crazy time at Hastings where we were just going to the state tournament and long seasons for each sport. You didn't really play that fall season, but you went from hockey right into baseball. Those guys were long football seasons, right into long hockey seasons, right into long baseball seasons. So what was that kind of experience like for you two, where it was maybe expected for you guys to go longer during your season and go deep in the postseason and maybe kind of bleeding right into the next season? So once again, just maybe walk us through what that was like for you.
I mean, it was always fun watching those guys going to all the games, and you could tell it was a special football team. That's kind of when Woodbury was good, Stillwater was good, and so those are some big games that they always played against them. And I can imagine like having to go to 3 long seasons like that in high school, like they said. So you can probably see the mental drain that some of them found, and it's just that's why I think it goes back to you lose in football, you lose in hockey, and then all of a sudden you're in the last one like this can't happen again. And sure enough, all the cards fell right for us at that time of the year. But yeah, there was definitely some special football players coming through that, and it's just, and a lot of people forget about that sport as well, and baseball. They just kind of think about the hockey stuff sometimes.
The next 2 questions I always ask kind of back to back, and you've had some amazing experiences at Hastings High School. So if you could think of a couple different experiences, that'd be great. So the first one I always ask is the most rewarding experience or part of being a high school athlete for Hastings. So what do you think that the most rewarding experience would be for you?
I think it was just kind of the small hometown feel. And that's obviously changed so much these days, where kids move, go to different schools, go to private schools, whatever you want to call it. That was kind of one of those things where you're growing up with everybody, and it doesn't matter if it's middle school, beginning years of high school. You can tell people around the track to kind of, okay, this could be a decent group that we could get in here and get, 3, 4, 5 years out of. So that was kind of the best thing I think I missed about Hastings, and also why I stayed. Had the opportunity to go to Ann Arbor to play for the U.S. team, leave high school, junior and senior year. And I was just like, you know what? I like baseball. I have a great time here. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If I go play after that, I'm lucky it worked out. Probably was a stupid decision in my book, but at the end of the day, I was very fortunate with that. So I think it was just the camaraderie, small town, which I liked the most from there.
Once again, the next one I ask is a little similar. So if you could think of something different, that'd be great. You won the state championship in baseball. You were in the state finals for hockey, but if it's one of those 2 things, that'd be great. If it's something else, that'd be awesome too. So what do you think your favorite moment was being a high school athlete at Hastings?
I think it was just, I wouldn't say athlete has anything to do with it. I think our group of high school students, and I could be way off base on this, but, I thought everybody was respectful, got along with each other. There was really not a whole lot of separation, and it didn't matter if you were the best athlete or just anybody else in high school. I think I'd like to say there was a nice respect factor that was probably one of the most memorable parts that I can remember.
Awesome. Thinking about some of the people now that had a big influence on you, and you played a lot of sports growing up and a couple sports in the high school. So it's really hard to nail down maybe that one coach that really was maybe the best coach. for you. So if you want to talk about a couple people, that'd be great. So who do you think that coach was that once again was maybe the best coach or had a really big impact on your life while you were in high school or before as well?
Yeah, I probably have a handful here. I think obviously it's my dad, first of all. He's the one that went outside with me all the time, drove me everywhere. Basically my parent, I mean, both of them, my mom did the same. But I think he's number one. He helped out with our baseball team. He was a huge influence with Mike Loud and Ron Driscoll. I think it was just a good fit for them. I mean, at the end of the day, they really didn't have to do too much. But and then I'd go a little bit younger. I think another one that I really liked was Mitch Horsch. He was our band coach. Just a great guy. It shows a lot about people. You're coaching a team that your kids aren't even on. It's a lot of hours. It's a lot of games. And I really enjoyed Mitch quite a bit. And then obviously Russ. And I think, Russ and I had my senior year, we had our differences big time. I know I was mad at him for a while. And looking back, I tell a lot of people this, he was hard on me because the game came easy to me. I never had to push myself. And so he could tell when I was slacking off or, not giving it my best. And that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And looking back, I know why he did it. Right? Mm-hmm. And I think, if I would have realized that a little bit earlier, I think it would have helped me out a little bit more, whether it's college or pro hockey. But it's kind of that tough love from Russ that really, like I said, kind of gave me a little fire towards him and towards the sport a little bit once in a while. But I mean, like I said, I just talked to him the other night for a while. So it's one of those things where that's the people that you need in those roles to understand not everybody's the same. You can't push certain people this way or that way. And you're just trying to look out for their best interests.
For sure. Now thinking about the guys that you played baseball with, you played hockey with, it's hard to maybe nail down that best teammate. And I've described it in many different ways. It could be that you've talked about some of the older guys you played with, someone that you really looked up to, maybe brought you up and took care of you. It could be those guys you played alongside with. It could be someone that, was that shoulder to cry in and go to when maybe Russ was yelling at you. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, who do you think that best teammate was for you growing up and throughout high school?
I think we were all pretty close. I think obviously Danny, he's one of those, generational players, three-sport. I tell him that to this day, he probably should have picked baseball over, hockey or football, to be honest with you. It was pretty crazy to watch him. Then you have Dustin Vogelzang, great athlete. I still talk to him all the time. But then I think a lot of those younger guys were a little overlooked on some of those teams until we were out of there. But it's like Vanderbosch, and then you talked about a Gerlach, and then you talk about quiet people like a Ben Utek and things like that. That it's kind of everybody kind of knew the piece of the puzzle and where they fit. And I think that was the best. So it's hard, like you said, it's hard to nail down one teammate when, you have a lot of guys playing college sports after high school that came through in those couple of years. But you got to give a lot of credit, like I said, to some of those older players that kind of helped develop the program into what it was and kind of stuck it out there.
Perfect. So you graduate from Hastings High School. Walk us through what the next couple of stages was. I know for maybe someone with hockey, there's maybe some juniors involved or maybe some college, and then you have a long pro career as well. So let's hear about when you leave Hastings High School. Let's go through the whole career after that as well.
Oh man. So ended up graduating, had to start for the Gophers, going into workout that year, 6'3", 145 pounds, 18 years old, out of my element. So that was an eye opener for me going into the weight room. I could hardly get the bar off my chest the first week. And it was just like, I think I played my first game at like 155 pounds. Got absolutely killed my first game. And that was kind of a big learning experience. I mean, you're gone from, 7 a.m. till 10 o'clock at night. You got to get your schoolwork done. You got to go practice. You got to go to the gym. There's so much to do that it's just like, it's a whirlwind. It really was. And so I found that pretty tough for me. We had a decent team there with Danuccio's first year. And I know pretty much all the guys weren't his players. So it was a little awkward. Then ended up second year, had a little bit better season there, felt a little bit more comfortable, a little bit bigger role in the team. Still, we lost pretty early in playoffs that year. We were okay. We weren't that good. And, I put on a little bit more weight, felt a little bit more comfortable. Then going into the third year, I definitely remember sitting in Lucia's office, and he's kind of giving me the runaround about a couple things. And I just told him I wanted to be a leader on that team and was going to have a great year. And, I was fortunate. We had, you got Jordan Leopold, you got Keith Ballard, you got Paul Martin, Johnny Pohl, Patoli, all these guys. So we could tell there was something happening the year before. And, it's definitely a long season. We ran into some tough teams. I don't think North Dakota beat us that year, but then, we couldn't beat Denver, and it was just kind of back and forth, and there was no real standouts, throughout the top 20 that year. So it was kind of an open game. Ended up, and I still remember this when Mike Gensel was recruiting us. He said, when you're a junior playing here, the national championship is at the Excel Center. And I was like, okay, that's a while off. No big deal. Well, ended up making it there. Like you said, got, snuck through a couple games. We felt pretty good in the regionals. Ended up playing Maine in the national championship game. And it was just kind of back and forth. It was one of those weird things. And then it was almost like what happened in high school with that Blaine game. Down one, ended up winning a faceoff, tying it, winning it in overtime. So that was amazing. I mean, we just had our 20-year reunion probably about a month or so ago here, and it's like nothing's changed. Everybody went up north on a golf trip last year. So those are really the people that, you still talk to a lot, and the high school guys. It's people don't realize that once you get into pro hockey, it's just such a business, and people are coming and going, and you're fighting for each other's job. It's not like, oh, here, you're going to be here for 4 years, and if you play well, you'll be on this line or that line. So my college career was definitely great, and after that, it was definitely time for me to move on. The opportunity was there with Phoenix. They want me to get out. It's kind of one of those things where I felt like I was ready, but I probably should have stayed one more year in college to develop a little bit more and play big minutes. So I went to Phoenix, had a good training camp, ended up getting sent down to Springfield. It was out in Mass at the time. So had a good year there, and, played a lot. You go from playing college hockey to all of a sudden you're playing, grown men, and it is a different game. So it's hard to find different ways to score, where you got to be, where you got to go, and just the pace of play. And so I think I probably played, 20 games with Phoenix that season, up and down. And I just remember the feeling like I didn't want to play in the American League anymore. It's a tough league. It was long bus rides. It was a hard league to play in. So ended up getting sent down the next year, right after training camp, last one cut. And I just said, I'm not getting a place. I'm staying in the hotel, do whatever I have to do to get out of here. And so I think after about 20 games, 15 or 20 games, ended up getting called up the entire season. And it went well. And then, the next year, the lockout happened. So I was in Utah, broke my orbital bone. So I was out the entire season, that one. And that really set me back a couple of years. It was just, after that, it's just, you kind of feel intimidated a little bit. You're always kind of worried about what's going to happen. And, it's like every other sport. You can't play that way. You just can't play that way. And it took me I'd say a few years to get over that. So in that meantime, I was, traded a few times, up and down a lot. It was just rough. I mean, it was not fun. I thought about going to Europe a little bit, didn't really want to do that yet, because you just feel like you're still good enough to play in the NHL. I went into Pittsburgh's training camp. I was like one of the first ones sent down. It was, because they didn't know who I was. They probably didn't, like, whatever, yeah, come to camp. Got sent down, and I got a call like 4 days later. Okay, they want you to play a couple more games. And I was like, and I looked at my buddy, I'm like, have you ever seen this before? And he's like, never in my life. So it was really strange. Ended up starting the year in Wilkes-Barre, which was their farm team, and having a good year. Got called up to Pittsburgh just because of injuries and stuff. And it was one of those seasons where I'm a fourth line guy there, I'm a first line guy in the American League. So it's a really hard to do because it's not like it is now, where if, a top player in the Wild goes down, they call up a skill guy. Back then, it was like, if anybody goes down, we're just calling up our best player, and we'll, you're going from playing 20 minutes, 25 minutes a night to playing 4 minutes a night. And if you turn the puck over, you're gone. But I was lucky. Guys kept getting hurt. We had a good team. I fit in pretty well there. So that season, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed Pittsburgh. It was a fun town. Then after that, I started the year there and got sent down the entire year. And that's probably when I was about 28, 29, maybe something like that, maybe a little less. And so had a really good year. Then I really bounced around in the minor leagues a little bit. And the minors were starting to pay guys a little bit more. Like I went to Rockford one year. Chicago's team got one game in Chicago, played all year in Rockford. Then I was with the Wild, played a couple games here, and most of them in Houston. I was with Florida's team, played 25 there and 75 in Rochester. So it was a weird year because I'd really never practiced. I'd just be flying back and forth all the time. And that it can get old. And I was going to give it one more chance. My buddy's like, hey, come out to Hershey, go to Washington's camp. I'm like, I don't even want to go to training camp. If they want me, whatever, it's fine. So we were married at the time, Jenny and I, and I'm trying to think. It was kind of one of those things where Hershey was a nice town, so I was very comfortable there. I said, I'll just play one more year, then we'll get out of here. We'll go overseas or something. Ended up having a really good year in Hershey. I signed a deal in Sweden, and right when I was getting ready to go over there, the GM of Hershey called me. He's like, what are you doing? I said, well, I don't know. He's like, well, Adam Oates, the head coach of Washington, he's like, he doesn't want you to go. I was like, well, what does that even mean? He's like, what's it going to take for you to stay? So I gave him a price. He's like, yeah, done. I was like, uh-oh, how am I going to get myself out of this one now? So that didn't go very well. Ended up staying one more year there. Had a great time. And then I knew it was time to leave. Just try to make a little bit more money while I could. So I ended up going to Sweden, loved it. I absolutely loved the culture, the people. One of the guys I just played with came into town last weekend for an ice fishing tournament. And I had a great time there. And then once you play well in Sweden, that's when the Russian teams start calling. So ended up going there for a year. And all the guys basically told me, like, you better mentally wrap your head around this because you don't know what you're getting into. So I was ready for it. It was worse than I expected, but basically, I'm like, I can do anything for 8 months. I can do anything for 8 months. Got through it. Played a couple more years in the Russian league. I played 1 year in Swiss. And at that time, it got hard for me because I was probably about 37. I was probably about 37 in Bratislava, which was in the KHL then still. They wanted me to come back. And I was just like, you know what? That's when I could tell, like, the last probably 3 or 4 years of my career, the culture had changed a lot, whether it's the guys in the locker room, what they were doing. I mean, I'm playing with, guys that are closer to my kids' age than mine. I'm having a great time, but at the end of the day, I was just kind of like, I was just over it. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I was just ready to get home. My kids were in, kindergarten by that time, first grade. So I just wanted to be around them for a while. So that was the up peaks and valleys of a pro career right there. And, I played a ton of games, met so many people. I'm so thankful for it. And I still talk to most of them these days. And it's just, parents just don't realize these days it's how hard it is to make it there. But then when you make it, to stay, it's absolutely mind-boggling. You see like Derek Stepan and some of these guys, that it's so impressive what the career he's had, and you got to give those guys a lot of credit.
I got a couple questions for you here.
Yep.
When you went to Minnesota, I guess let's rewind all the beginning. You talked about being kind of undersized. Was there ever talk about redshirting you, or was that ever in the, like, when you went there at all? No, nothing.
No, there was nothing like that. And they really didn't even do much of that, to be honest, back then. I think they understood, and everybody pretty much understood. You see the reports, like first round pick, whatever, all this kind of stuff. I did well in the international tournament. So I think if they would have redshirted me, they would have known I was out of there. So that was kind of one of those things where I was definitely probably one of the skinnier ones on the team, and they knew they had some work to do, but I got by with it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Other sports, obviously, redshirting is pretty huge. Maybe for hockey, maybe more juniors is where the redshirting might take place. Is that probably, am I accurate on that or no?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So now, I mean, you'll only find the top couple guys on each team coming in as true freshmen, I think.
Okay.
I mean, the
Gotcha.
Gophers get a ton of them. That's the biggest thing people don't understand. It's, they're in a tough spot because they're getting all these first round draft picks, but like me, you're a little undersized and you might not be good the first year or second year or whatever. It just takes a lot of time to grow into yourself. But now all the NHL teams are like, yeah, go there for a year and you'll come play for us. And that's difference. And then you're getting into the playoffs, you're playing Mankato and all these teams that you're playing 24, 25, 26-year-olds. And that's a huge difference for this. They can just grind you down. And so, I think the Gophers have a little bit better chance this year, but yeah, it's still going to be tough. So yeah, there was no real redshirting for a lot of us back then. No.
Gotcha. So you talked about kind of making that jump in each of the levels you played in. So maybe Bantams to high school to college to pros. What was that like making that jump? Was it really, obviously, maybe what was the hardest one, or maybe how did you handle those transitions from each level?
I think each level is a little bit different. I think one of the biggest ones for some kids would probably be peewees to Bantams. You're in that 6th, 7th grade range to 8th, 9th grade range where could be huge differences in heights and weights. And that's kind of one of my biggest, I don't know. I just kind of wonder why we're taking the hitting out of hockey and installing it so late, whether it's Bantams or I don't even know what it is these days, but it's too late. I think they need to introduce it at a younger age where you can just bump into people, know how to go into a corner, get the puck, know how to take a hit, know how to give a hit. Because when you're jumping up at that age range from peewees to Bantams, you're going to get killed. If kids don't know how to protect themselves, that's, I think, where it's going to get really dangerous. And I don't get the thinking behind it. Obviously, there's a lot smarter people than me out there that have figured it out, but it's kind of one of those things where it's kind of been driving me crazy since I've been back here watching some of these high school games. There's a penalty every 4 seconds and nothing gets called. And it's just, well, if they're calling the NHL, why are we not calling it in high school? So I think that was a tough jump for me. The peewees to the Bantams. High school, I don't even really remember. I thought it was kind of easy. Like I was pretty good by that time, I think. So it made a big difference. Could kind of get around the ice. Okay. And then the jump to college was definitely an eye opener for probably about the first 30 games. And then once you realize like, okay, I'm not that far off. I'm still pretty good here. That it wasn't as much. And then the pro one, that it's definitely a huge jump, but that's just the travel, the playing every other night, or whether it's 4 nights a week. College, you only play 2 games a week on the weekend. You get prepared, you get rested, where you're jumping into pro hockey with, guys that are 30, 35 years old. They're used to it. It's easy. And then you're coming in and you're like, oh my gosh, we just got home at 3 a.m. and we got practice at 8. It's just trying to, live a different life that way is tough.
Gotcha. My next question, maybe easy to answer, maybe hard to answer. I've never talked to anyone in this kind of position before. What's it like to be traded? What is kind of like? I mean, I watched Major Leagues before, and I've seen them cut people in the movie and how the trading works in the movies. But what's it like to maybe get brought in? Is it like the anticipation, the anxiety that you're always on the chopping block, or when you get that call when you go in there? Is you're like, oh, here it is, I'm leaving now, or is it the coach is just having a great conversation with you, and then, I mean, maybe walk through what it's like when the coach says, hey, you're going to this place here, and kind of what it's like to leave one place where you maybe send some roots in, and then you're headed to somewhere else right away. So I know that's a lot, but what's that process kind of like?
That was the one time. I mean, I got traded one time, and it was from Phoenix, and my wife, we like bought a house there, and everybody thinks they're going to play in this one city forever, right the first place you go. And I could tell it was kind of going downhill, and everybody kind of gets a sense like that's ever been traded. Like, okay, this could happen for sure. And then I kind of needed a fresh start, I thought. So I was not disappointed by any means, but you see how quick it happens. And you're just like, oh, there's my plane ticket. See you later. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Then you go into a new city. You got to meet all new people. Oh, we're playing a game tonight. We're doing this. We're doing that. And it's just, that's the hardest thing to get used to. I'd say the most pressure is like after training camps when you're kind of a bubble guy. You're on pins and needles every day around the locker room. You just don't know if you could get cut this day, the next day. And then, when you finally do get called in, they're like, oh, you made the team, or yeah, you had a good camp, but we need you to go down here for a little while. And that's usually the worst, because the buildup of all summer to thinking if you're ready for it, that's usually the hardest one to deal with.
Is it ever one of the things too where you're maybe looking at the other guys that you're on the ice with and you're like, well, I'm better than that guy, I'm better than this guy, and then maybe they keep one of those guys and then you get sent down where you're just like, God, I'm right there with them, or I feel like I'm at this level and I could keep on hanging on for a few years. Like, is there anything that goes on with that line of thinking?
Oh, for sure. I think a lot of it has to do with, even back in the day, a salary cap, as far as like looking around the locker room. And if, what's his name, just making this much, I'm making this much, or, that plays a big role into it. I know that. And so that once you kind of see that, you're like, okay, I get it. But when you see that some of the guys stay in and you're going that, like, that doesn't really make sense, but you don't know. Like, you don't know who their agent is. Well, maybe the coach loves them for something else that they do, or whatever. So it's a lot to read into. And once you start doing that, you're done. Like, you can just show up every day, work as hard as you can, and that's it. That's all you can do. You can't control what management is ever doing.
Gotcha. So kind of thinking about some of the questions we asked when looking back on your high school career, if you could look back on your pro career and think about maybe the most rewarding or your favorite moment, most rewarding experience or favorite moment of being a pro athlete, what do you think that would be?
Definitely being part of that Pittsburgh team that won the Stanley Cup, that really stands out to me. You're Sidney Crosby, Letang, Malkin, all these guys. That was a very tight-knit team. It was kind of one of those where I was with them the year before too when we lost, and you just saw the emotion, how much everybody cared. So for them to finally win and being part of it, although I'm out on the ice with them after, it still didn't feel the same because I wasn't playing. It's just one of those things where, it's just a different feeling where you respect what they did so much. You're still part of the group, but you're not. And so that was one of the toughest things in my career. But as far as like being around guys like that's something you can never forget.
Awesome. So I did interview Aaron Fox a long time ago, and Aaron played in the KHL. He played in the European League for a long time too. So he shared some KHL stories from back in the day. If you want to give maybe the most appropriate or maybe the best KHL story, because he was talking about some wild things that happened back in the day over there. So if you want to give one of your best KHL stories, we'd love to hear it, or maybe any stories from your time in Europe as well.
I can give you an appropriate one from the terrible place in Russia that I was. It was bad. Oh, it was bad. We had this old school coach, this Krikanov, and I don't know if people ever listen to hockey podcasts, but everybody knows about this guy. He's just, not a lick of English, just stares at you with disgust all the time, hates North American people. And so the only good part about him was that he just spoke Russian, so I never had to listen to him and I never had to speak to him. But I get a call from my translator the first time, and he's like, hey, coach wants everybody out front. And this is at like 11 o'clock at night. So I'm like, what? What's this? What is this all about? So he's like, bring your shoes. I'm like, all right. So we're doing a 10-mile run in the icy woods in the middle of Russia, and they're following us behind in their cars, smoking cigarettes. And I'm just like, what is going on? And that happened probably every couple of weeks. You just get the call because they kept such a close eye on you over there, because if they gave the Russians a night off or a day off, there's no such thing as a day off, because they would literally all fly to Moscow or stay out all night drinking. And so that's why I'm saying it was like being in prison for 8 months realistically. But yeah, that's a tame Russian story for sure.
He was talking about, and it's a wild story for him, Aaron Fox. He just somehow took over this KHL team, just kind of stroke of luck. And then he said he got flown into a place, and they're like, hey, kind of welcome in. And they're just taking a couple of shots of vodka. And then he had to go coach. He's like, man, I couldn't even see where the puck was on the ice. So it was, he's like, man, this is just absolutely crazy. So
they'll pay you like, and when they used to pay in cash, this was before me, but I've heard they used to pay guys in cash, and then they have people come to your house when you're at practice and just rob you. Or if you weren't playing well, they would plan something and be like, okay, you can either go to jail or you can just go home and not get paid. So it was pretty dicey. I'd like to say it's gotten better, which it has, but it's still it's old school. I mean, you gotta love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you get done playing professionally. Let's take us to when you ended professional hockey to kind of where we are now. So take us through maybe your family, occupation, all that kind of stuff as well.
Yep. So married my wife, Jenny. We have 2 kids. They are in 4th grade now, Georgia and Walker. We have twins. So we were out in California. We actually moved back to Minnesota probably 3 years ago, just to be a little bit closer to family and stuff, and look into some work opportunities. After I retired, I just kind of wanted to be around them, help them out a little bit, and they finally got to the age where they didn't really need me that much anymore. So I kind of figured, all right, it's time to look into something else. And I'm not a desk job kind of a person, so I ended up meeting up with some guys in Minneapolis, and I work for a company called MBW Group right now. Kind of the financial planning industry, very high on the life insurance and tax purposes for businesses and personal things. That's what we really focus on. So that's something I was always kind of interested in. I had some bad experiences when I was younger, and just looking to help guys out. That's kind of all I'm trying to do, whether it's family, friends, athletes. It's just, I've been there, I've done it, and I just can be honest with people. And at the end of the day, it gives me some freedom too, which I like.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Jeff, before we get into our last couple of questions, if there's anything else from elementary school, high school, college, pros, anything else you would like to add in, kind of maybe put a bow on all those things. Like I said, feel free to add it in right now before we get to our last couple of questions.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say too much. I think you just got to enjoy the experience, whether you're a B squared, a C Pee Wee, or whatever. I mean, if you enjoy playing and you're having fun, stick with it. Everybody, like you said, everybody develops at a different time in their life. And if you can work hard and stick it out, and hey, maybe one day you'll make the varsity team, or hey, maybe you'll play junior college hockey. I think there's just a lot of pressure on kids now to be the best at the earliest age. And I just don't see it that way. I think, like I said, if you're respectful to your coaches, respectful to other people, work hard, coaches will want you. If maybe you're an A or a B player kind of bubble, I'm going to take the kid that's not going to give me an attitude and show up every day and work hard. So I think you need to look at it that way from a sports side of it. And just like I said, enjoy where you live, be respectful of the people around you. And I think that's the biggest thing I'd ever say.
For sure. That kind of ties directly into our last couple of questions. We always ask all our guests is pieces of advice for, we usually start off with parents and coaches and then student athletes. So I think that really is very good advice for our student athletes. Is there anything else you would like to, we usually ask for just a couple pieces of advice, but anything else you would like to add in for maybe student athletes that could be listening to this as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think I summed it up in that one. It's just like, just be respectful to your teammates. Don't try to showboat. Don't try to do anything. And that's kind of drives me nuts watching the high school games now. You score a goal, you're going, doing your own thing instead of celebrating with your teammates. And I don't know. I don't like the way that's turning. I don't know. Not really sure where it's coming from, but I think just from a parent's perspective, I mean, I was just a volunteer coach for 2 years, and my kids don't even play hockey. And so I'm out there doing it, and I'll never forget the kids that would come up and say, hey, thank you, or just be respectful. But you'll remember the kids with the bad attitude, the parents that are emailing. Don't do that. If there's a problem, I think that, maybe you talk to your kid first and get the story straight before. And I've just seen too much of it in 2 years that, like I said, everybody wants to be the best at this age. And, everybody grows at a different time, but the kids that would play on our team are the hard workers. And I wasn't the hardest worker ever. I was good, but I also minded my own business. So I think the parents just need to take a step back and realize that it's a high school sport. It's a Pee Wee sport, and just let the kids have fun. There's just can't be too much pressure, but at the same time, hopefully they're doing the right thing, please and thank you to the coaches. That's all it takes. That's all it takes to go a long ways, I think.
That's great. I couldn't have said it better myself. So, Jeff, that's all the questions I got for you.
Awesome.
Final thing we always do is just turn the microphone over to our guest. Anything else you would like to add in? Anything I forgot to ask you? Any other shout outs you want to give? Like I said, the microphone's yours and you can go for it.
Yeah, not too many. I mean, I just want to, obviously, my parents got me everywhere I was. My wife, she's traveled all over this world, basically. For everybody back there, like, I think it was kind of like the last two questions. Just enjoy it. Enjoy being an athlete. Enjoy growing up with your friends. You know, it doesn't matter if you're going to play longer in life. Who cares? It's just one of those things where I think everybody's so concerned about getting on to the next thing, and instead of enjoying what they're doing right now. And that was the one thing I was happy that I didn't do, was leave high school to go to the U.S. team where I didn't know anybody. And look what happens. You know, you have lifelong friends, and who knows how that would have turned out if I didn't.
That's perfect. Thanks, Jeff.
Awesome.